I'm proud to present to you a budget with record investment in serving our learners. We have an increase of $861 per student. That's the highest increase ever per student. And that is really important in reducing class size, compensating for learning loss, better compensation for teachers, better funding enrichment and academic programs with proven results. And we'll look forward to working with our districts to align the investment with better outcomes for our youth. This budget decreases the budget stabilization factor to a 14-year low of 3%. And we also add support for mental health programs, the iMatters program, free mental health services for youth, $6 million investment. In addition to the significant, in addition to the largest increase in funding for our schools, we also are recommending some additional funds for school safety, $8.4 million for school safety, which are grants for physical improvements in buildings and classrooms, locked doors, entrance systems, building capacity for school districts and charter schools to have a one-stop shop for school safety, and expanding the threat assessment training for our schools to make sure that parents are confident that our schools are safer and that Colorado schools are safer for all students and families that they serve. With regard to higher education, we are recommending an $86 million investment. This would maintain tuition increase rate at a significantly lower growth rate than inflation, so about a 4% increase, about half the rate of inflation. We're also very excited exploring policies to further drive down the cost of college, but from a budget perspective, we want to make sure that the higher education inflation rate is significantly lower than the overall inflation rate, as well as making college more affordable for low-income families. Next slide. Business creation and additional fee relief. We're very excited by the initial results from our making it only $1 to start a new business for the one quarter that's been operative, July, August, September. New business formation has increased 18%. And we want to continue that for another year to remove barriers to entrepreneurship and to also save small businesses money. For business where, starting out with $400 or $500, that's a big deal to save them $75 or $100 if that's a quarter of what you have to start that business with. And we look forward to continuing to pass those savings along to entrepreneurs and small businesses. Reducing background check fees for individuals becoming licensed child care providers, removing barriers, making it easier and lower cost to start or expand a child care business in the state of Colorado. And continuing free transit services, which also showed very good initial results for Coloradans in terms of saving people money and also contributing to cleaner air. Next slide. Now making communities safer and more affordable, how our communities can thrive across the state. Continue. The biggest piece of this, building off of our work to make Colorado one of the 10 safest states over the next 5 years. Last year's public safety package, the money, of course, going out. We are putting forward a $42.1 million investment in public safety. That means better tools and resources to reduce auto theft, including support for prosecutors to hold criminals accountable, reducing crime and supporting communities, supporting the recruitment and retention of law enforcement officers, both the state patrol and support for local sheriff's departments and police departments to recruit and retain the people we need to keep our communities safe, and increasing intervention and effective crime prevention strategies. I want to highlight the success of our bipartisan reinsurance program. This has a dedicated funding source, so it's not in need of additional funding in this budget cycle, but significant reductions to premiums for people who buy their insurance in the exchange. So if you don't get your insurance from your employer, if you don't have Medicare or Medicaid, that's in the group you're in, and significant savings of $2,800 to $7,500 a year because of the reinsurance program. We're increasing certain doula services and donor milk to improve infant and maternal health, preventing a wait list on youth behavioral health services, and really focusing on driving down costs through provider payment incentives, aligning payments to outcomes. Better outcomes, lower cost as a key driver of reducing the cost of health care for every Coloradan. Next slide. There's going to be a lot of discussions in the next legislative session on how we can reduce housing costs from Coloradans. One of the areas from a budget perspective that we feel will be the largest impact for the modest amount of money is on workforce housing on state-owned properties, public-private partnerships. The state is a major property owner in the state. State Land Board, CDOT, Department of Human Services, DNR, many different entities. On top of the state land, there's also locally owned land, school districts, counties, cities. And we want to partner to make sure we can unleash the potential of some of the publicly owned lands to actually meet the needs of the community from a workforce and middle-class housing perspective. One of the investments we highlight, because it will be ready to go with a part of this funding, is Dow Junction. It's a state land board property in Vail Valley. Currently, CDOT occupies part of it. We want to bring 80 new workforce housing units online to Vail Valley, needed. We're ready to go. Those are the kinds of projects that we've identified in many areas of our state that we look forward to aggressively pursuing to reduce the underutilization of state-owned lands across different agencies and entities. Next slide. We continue the work to deliver on reducing homelessness in Colorado and supporting our local partners. We are working with cities like Aurora and Denver on locally driven solutions that will reduce homelessness that we can help fund and support from last year's appropriations. What we're adding in this year is reducing some of those drivers of homelessness and people entering the system. So one of those are foster youth that age out. We want to work on better supporting foster youth that age out who are at risk of homelessness with housing support, more funding through counties for at-risk adults to prevent them from falling into homelessness, and additional support for Fort Lyon, our proven model that helps people exit homelessness, overcome drug addiction and mental health issues. We've discussed a similar model in partnership with Arapahoe County and Aurora for the Ridgeview campus, state-owned property, better leveraging that to reduce homelessness. And we also look forward to establishing additional partnerships with Denver and Adams and other counties to help reduce homelessness. Protecting our land, air, and water, a basic principle and goal that we aspire to. One of the biggest threats to residents of the state of Colorado and our safety is fire risk. So we are recommending a significant fire safety package, $38.3 million, to help mitigate and recover from wildfires. The single biggest component is increasing aerial resources to fight fires and additional staff to coordinate these efforts. For years in the past, Colorado has relied on an interstate pool of aerial assets, tankers and helicopters. But what do you do when there's fires in New Mexico, California, Colorado? We need to really have the aerial resources in place to go after small fires before they become large. As you know, we purchased our state's first Firehawk helicopter, delivered soon. This will allow for additional exclusive lease capacity and lease-to-own capacity for aerial resources to fight fires in Colorado. It also includes support for local firefighters, local mitigation efforts, and landscape mitigation efforts. I've been out with crews in Woodland Park near Evergreen under the auspices of the Lieutenant Governor's Office and AmeriCorps. We have the Youth Conservation Corps. These are 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Over summer, they learned to operate chainsaws, working with state forester, working with fire marshals. They're able to take down fuel, which are essentially trees and brush, in and around communities, in and around homes. We're doubling down those efforts for defensive fire perimeters around communities and also at the home level for those who live in the wildland-urban interface, as well as better data systems to attack fires early. We also make important investments in preserving water quality and protecting our rights and access. $17.6 million to continue to support the state water plan, $1.9 million to protect our water rights under the Colorado River Compact. That is heating up, and we need the technical analysis and support to make sure that we can aggressively defend Colorado's water rights under that compact. And $30 million, very importantly, for federal matching funds to take advantage of $200 million that we've identified under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act for water infrastructure and water quality projects. So an excellent return on investment that we look forward to working with the legislature to make sure that we can meet our matching fund requirement to draw down additional funds to secure our water future. This is a balanced budget with record reserves. This budget limits operating growth to 7%. That's significantly below the 8.3% rate of inflation and even more below the 9% rate of inflation plus growth. So 2% below the inflation plus growth of the state, operational savings, general fund reserve of 15% because of the great economic uncertainty in the future and the risk of recession. And then, of course, we'd work with the legislature in prior sessions for prepays, using just under half of those prepays for this year's balancing as well. So again, we also want to maximize return on investment. So this goes to the next one. Yeah, this is in addition to the water piece. There's a lot of funding under the Infrastructure Act. Our goal is to draw down more than our fair share to Colorado to benefit our residents. And so we've identified some of the matching needs, building off of SB 22-215, to make sure that Colorado can compete to draw down the maximum funds that are available under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. Finally, we have a budget navigator. It's all linked. You all have access online. It should have been emailed to you while I was talking. It went live at 1. We have the OSPB. Thanks to Lauren Larson, her team. Great work on the evidentiary evaluations. Transparent, easy links for anything that you want more information on. And as I indicated, this simply begins the budget process. There's a little thing called an election in a week. There's new forecasts in December. There's an amendment letter. All of that, of course, will be determinative in the final project, but we wanted to put forward a thoughtful budget with strong reserves that invests in our future in education and secures our air, our land, and our water, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. With that, we're happy to take questions, which will be directed by Connor. Oh, be directed by Maria. Jesse. Yeah. Well, we're very open to extending those. The gas fee relief continues through April. So I think what us, as well as the legislature, will want to see is where our gas price is and how important this is to do. But we are very open to any and all fee relief that the legislature is willing to consider. And we have some time in the legislative session to look into that as that continues through April.
Governor, I'm seeing, Lauren, I'm seeing $30 million in here for personnel under Colorado Wind. Is that a wage increase for state workers?
Which line item are you referring to?
Request number 3 in the Department of Personnel and Administration, statewide co-wage wage reopener impact.
I'll let Lauren speak to that. I would say that there is an across-the-board 5% increase for the state workforce. And of course, on top of that, targeted increases for areas that are underpaid and we've had difficulty recruiting. I would give an example of Department of Corrections, our 24/7 facilities, State Patrol. We have significant increases in the 10 to 12% range, but the across-the-board increase is 5%, and I'll let Lauren speak to that particular line item.
Sure, thank you. John, there's a package involved with our agreement with Colorado Winds, and that's an important part of the package for implementing the different human resource tools that we think will make us a leading employer in the state with recruitment and retention.
So that's not the 5%, it's different.
It's part of the larger package. Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
And Governor, just a quick follow-up, because you just mentioned it, there is an election in a week. How do you think this budget is colored by your re-election campaign, and what items in here are some of the promises you're making on the campaign trail this time around that you want to see done in the legislature?
Well, I think it's important to note that, again, we have the statutory requirement to produce this budget November 1st. We will be, or the governor-elect will be, submitting a January amendment to focus on priorities and also be able to use the most recent forecasting data. Our focus is improving public safety in Colorado, building off of our work last session to make Colorado one of the 10 safest states. Record investment in our public schools. I've been a long advocate of education. My time on the state board, founding charter schools, serving on the Education Committee on Congress. I'm very excited to deliver an $861 per student increase for our schools, and I look forward to seeing how our districts will improve learning outcomes with this investment. We're excited to make progress on affordable housing, on fire safety, and a number of other priorities that we've identified, as well as making sure that Colorado is better prepared than ever before for a rainy day or global economic uncertainty.
Marianne? Yeah, I have a couple of questions on the water portion of the budget. Can you, 17.6 million for the water plan is less than a fifth of the state's expected or hoped for obligation. Have you given up on trying to reach that $100 million mark?
No, actually a lot of the, some but not all, I would dare say a lot of the 200 million that we hope to draw down with the 30 million in matching funds aligns with our state water plan. So again, some of it are areas that are tangentially benefit to water that that might not align with our state plan, but absolutely some of that 200 we've identified under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act that we would use the 30 million to help attract to Colorado would align with that. We're certainly open to additional investment as well, working with our water basins. I would highlight the strong support for the Arkansas River Basin last session. We look forward to continuing to work to secure Colorado's water future.
Can you also explain this 1.9 million to protect water rights? What is that money going to be used for?
So as you we've all know and have heard and has been reported on, discussions around the Colorado River Basin have increased significantly. There's a lot at stake for Colorado farmers and ranchers, as well as our cities and suburbs. Our plan is to aggressively defend Colorado's water rights. To do that, we need the engineering, analysis, and technical support to bolster Colorado's position in preserving our strength as an upper basin state in all future discussions of the Colorado River Compact.
So, Governor, the most recent legislative forecast pointed out that for this upcoming budget, after you accounted for all the growing needs and obligations, there wasn't a tremendous amount of money left over for new programs, and I think you probably accounted for most of that. What's your message to lawmakers about what's left over if they want to spend money on new programs?
I would say that's correct what you said. You know, very different. We had a lot of one-time funds in particular. I would add that some of those one-time funds were used across 2 or 3 years. So like the homelessness initiatives from last session, the public safety initiatives, those are by no means spent. They will continue through this fiscal year, some even into the next fiscal year. But yes, there is very little room in this budget for new programs. We're happy to work with Republicans and Democrats on finding additional savings. I would really recommend that if legislators have ideas for new programs, they offset them by eliminating or reducing other programs because you know, we need to maintain strong reserves more than ever before in the face of global economic uncertainty. Otherwise, the legislature would be in a position to make major slashes to the budget should a recession occur, which has a significant likelihood. So we want to make sure we maintain that position of strength to be ready for a rainy day. And we look forward to using evidence to guide the best possible investments with the limited dollars we have. And if legislators from both sides of the aisle have ideas, we can work with them to find potential offsets if they can show that their ideas will drive success more for the state of Colorado.
And Governor, is there anywhere where you've reduced spending in this budget or found efficiencies already?
Yeah, there's many areas. In fact, the overall operating budget decreased. What is it again?
The 7%.
No, the other one.
The overall budget is down 1.2%.
The overall budget is down 1.2%. That's in part because of, again, one-time funds that have been going through. So the overall budget down 1.2%, and this budget on the operating basis grows significantly slower than the rate of inflation. So there's significant savings that are embedded across this budget, and we look forward to further exploring those trade-offs with lawmakers if there's evidence around other policies that can work for Colorado.
Governor, can you elaborate on your vision for the workforce housing?
Yeah. So the state is a major landowner, right? So it's state land board's the single biggest, but it's a lot broader than state land board. Department of Human Services, Department of Transportation. We also have many other public landowners like school districts and cities and counties with a targeted investment, right? I mean, you know, housing is, you can spend hundreds of millions or billions. We're saying not that. I mean, there is an initiative about that, and we did put, you know, $400 million of American Rescue Act money into that, but we're saying let's focus on biggest bang for our buck. $15 million public-private partnerships, unleashing hundreds of acres of underutilized and non-utilized state-owned and locally owned land for meeting housing needs in communities. And so we highlighted the Dow Junction project because it's ready to go. What will happen with this investment? But there are many others that we are pursuing that are currently state-owned land where we can provide real community benefit by providing additional housing opportunities close to where jobs are. Mostly it's, I'll give you, I mean, I don't use the word retrofit. I mean, so like Dow Junction, we have a gravel pit and we have 5 trailers there. So we're actually going to leave the gravel pit there because it's expensive to move it. Maybe that would be a phase 2 of Dow Junction. But we're going to replace the 5 trailers and the several acres they're on with 80 units. CDOT employees live in the trailers. They'll get upgrades to the units. Then the other 75 or 70 will be available for work, for law enforcement officers, for teachers, for people that work in and around that area. That's an example of a project. We're happy to give you more information about that particular project. But I wouldn't call it retrofitting because it's basically an empty lot. I mean, a lot of this land is empty that is owned by different state entities. Congratulations, Marshall, new father. I know you're taking away from your family leave to be with us, so thanks for joining us.
You will have to answer for that.
Yeah.
One broad thing, then something very specific, but you've highlighted all the positives. What's one part of this that you hope we don't look at because you're not happy about?
Is that a good question to ask me, Marshall? I would just highlight, it's not in the budget, but I think the global economic uncertainty is a risk factor. I mean, that's why we don't recommend record reserves for fun. We recommend record reserves because of great global uncertainty. You can talk to 7 economists and you'll have 15 different projections of where we'll be, but of those 15 projections, half of them will show a recession next year, right? So there's a risk of greater uncertainty. And we need to prepare for that. Not always a fun thing to do, but it's a fiscally prudent and it's a sound thing to do. And that means we need to be thoughtful and prudent about our investments this year, and we are in this budget.
My specific question, I don't see a dollar amount. So if you can tell me the dollar amount, I see that you want another 3 months of RTD.
Yeah.
For next year. How much is that, and at what point does RTD need to be responsible for encouraging ridership and not the state paying for them as perhaps a bailout?
So first of all, our Free Fair August is broader than just RTD. It's transit agencies across the state. I'll get you the exact number that participated, but RTD does happen to be the largest transit agency in the state. But this is something that was statewide available to different transit agencies, and nearly all or all of them took us up on that. And essentially what the state did is it said, we'll give you, it's not any kind of bailout. I said, we'll give you the money you would have gotten for fares in August, make it free. So they're kind of held harmless. They don't benefit economically. They don't cost them. Who benefits? People who pay fares benefit, and then we all benefit. We're reduced traffic and better air quality. So the initial evidence shows that it increased ridership. No surprise. You reduce the cost of something, increase ridership, save families money. This particular program was funded from prior appropriations, so we do not need new funding for this in this budget. We're highlighting that it continues, and so far it's showing success, and it's something that we believe we can build off of to both save people money, reduce traffic, and improve transit opportunities.
Governor, I was hoping you could go back to the slide about the matching money that you're putting up for the infrastructure projects. You identified $91 million.
Yes, last slide.
One, why did you pick those particular areas? I mean, transit was at the top and there were some others. Why pick those as where we're going after? And two, what are the chances that you think we're going to get that? How much does that really put us?
It's the last slide, I think. Last slide, yeah. So we've set up a very thoughtful approach to this under the leadership of Pat Myers, who is our Chief Recovery Officer, to really, the charge I gave him and our team is maximize the amount that Colorado draws down under competitive grants. They have now been through and looked at, along with our agencies, the potential grant programs that are out there or will be out there under the Infrastructure Act, and identify these as areas where with Colorado matching funds, we have a high likelihood of success. I should also point out that, of course, if a particular grant proposal is not successful, that money is not spent. It would return to state coffers in the General Assembly to be spent. But we do need to have that because we want to aggressively pursue these, and all of these have a high likelihood of success, and we're confident that we can draw significantly more resources to the state, upwards of $7 billion in funding. With this, the SB 22-215 funds, and the water infrastructure matching funds we talked about. So there's several pots we're using to compete for this $7 billion, and we're going to fight for every penny for Colorado.
And just one quick follow-up. I don't see highway expansion on there. Why not?
There is a lot of formulaic money coming from highway expansion. We also have gotten some grants for that. We do most of those matching funds out of the House Bill 260 funds. So not most, that's where we match them. So we are in a much, we mentioned this when I signed House Bill 260, you might remember it. I said this sets us up for success with the Infrastructure Act. Had that not passed, we would have to have a huge ask in here to not forego highway funds because we have House Bill 260, we can match on highway funds. So these are things that do not have dedicated funding sources like our roads do.
Can you give us a dollar figure for the budget stabilization factor? And then can you elaborate on your plan to buy that down, especially knowing lawmakers, other lawmakers have tried to eliminate that in one fell swoop and failed?
The increase in education funding, $861 per student, that is 705? What's our total? 705. $705 million increase in education investment, buys down our budget stabilization factor to 3%. Again, we need future forecasts and see what the money is, but we would be hopeful that with this budget, we would be able to do an additional buy down the following fiscal year. That would certainly be our goal. But this would be a record low budget stabilization factor since that first year. It's a record low since the second year, and the largest single investment the state's made in our schools.
So perceivably, when would that BS factor be eliminated entirely?
Well, again, I can't speculate on years or decades, but what I can say is lowest budget stabilization factor this year. We fully expect that we will be in a position to further buy down that budget stabilization factor next year. But this is, the 23-24 budget, not the 24-25 or 25-26. So we are showing record progress towards funding our schools and buying down the budget stabilization factor.
Governor, there's been talk among members of the JBC of changing the inflation plus population cap on paper to decouple inflation away. That's why you guys have so little money from these programs this year. I'm curious if you support that effort, and also more broadly, how you plan to approach table refunds this year. If you're going to go back to 6-tier or want to pursue legislation again to do a flat rebate.
Well, I haven't, heard on the first item. On the second item, I would reiterate, my priority would be to reduce the income tax rate. There's a ballot initiative that would do that. If that fails to pass, then we need to get the legislature to reduce the income tax. John?
Yes, Governor, I want to follow up on what you mentioned last time about the public safety package. In here, and I just lost my page, there was 14.6 million for auto theft
Yes.
prevention, and then another couple million for novel crime investigations, which lists fentanyl as one of them.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering what you would say to critics who say it's a little too late for auto theft money because we're already at record highs, and critics who may say that fentanyl isn't novel, and so why are you just now getting to it?
So is our toxicology lab in that other line? So what the biggest part of that, $3 billion on the other line, I think, if it shows more than 3 million. Yeah, we're upgrading the state toxicology lab to more rapid processing of results, including whether substances contain fentanyl. Fentanyl is one of those major areas where we have the requests from local law enforcement that we didn't have, John, 3 years ago. Now we have the request to say we need faster turnaround. We need to know whether fentanyl's in this or not. There's also been great technological improvements in fentanyl detection because of the national need for this. On auto theft, the focus of the investment is a couple-fold. One is supporting local law enforcement. The second, and this is what we heard from prosecutors across the state, is increased prosecutorial resources to go after auto thieves. And so we would be supporting 10 prosecutors that focus on auto theft across judicial districts in our state in jurisdictions with high auto theft rates that have been combated. Again, this is not something they requested 2 or 3 years ago. It's something that meets the need today because they need increased ability to make sure they go after people who are committing property crimes, including auto theft.
Last question, Marianne. Yeah, Governor, the Office of Public Guardianship is in the midst of expansion, and part of that expansion carries into the next fiscal year. We have received word that they are still having a high number of client deaths, another 5 in the last couple of months. Your office promised more oversight. When is that oversight going to show up? Because right now what I'm hearing is they're getting nothing from your office.
Well, first of all, I think what you're asking, I want to be clear. So you're not really asking a budget question. You're asking a different question.
Part of this is that they are supposed to do a self-directed review
Yeah.
presented to the oversight committees in January.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they're going to come out and say, yeah, we're doing a terrible job. Let's shut
This is a very important topic. I think what we should do, Lisa, maybe we can figure out, connect you with Dr. Medlock, of course, but I'm happy to give a response. It's a little bit more detailed, and it's not, maybe it has budget ramifications, but it's not primarily budget, Marianne, but we will get you something today on it.
Question, Governor. There are
It's a very important question.
died in the last 18 months in this program.
Yeah. It's a very important question, and we have, it's been elevated, you know, with Dr. Medlock, with our team, and we think that action is needed. Marshall? Of course, you're a new father. You can, go ahead.
Equitably, like you did it this time, or go back to the methods that existed where the more you earn, the more you're going to get back?
Well, I did answer it, but I'll answer it again. So first of all, how large a taper surplus is depends on several ballot initiatives, okay? And I also want to be clear that these ballot initiatives, we do not see any of these ballot initiatives as affecting this budget. So that's another thing I want to be clear on. So there's a bunch of ballot initiatives, housing, income tax cut primarily. A couple others have some impact, but those two, they do not affect this budget. Why? Because they deal with monies that are projected to be in a surplus. You know, any ballot initiative could hypothetically affect a future budget if there's a recession. Actually, you should teach me, but you did a report on this the other day. So, but neither of them affect this budget that we're presenting. If there is a taper surplus, my priority is reducing the income tax. Always has been, always will be. The voters might do that. I support that. But if they don't, then that was something we would seek through the legislature. I've also said I'm not a fan of the 6-tier mechanism. I would be happy to entertain some compromise where part of it was an income tax cut, part of it was a refund. But our priority, increasing productivity, incentivizing work, helping small businesses grow, reducing the burden of the income tax, but we're always happy to entertain that discussion with legislators. But really, if several initiatives pass, there'll be a very small taper surplus. So I mean, let's watch this and see how much there is to even be talking about.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everybody.